And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. As we head into the full days of summer, baseball is back. And this week, teams will report for spring training, if you want to call it that, in July. And later that month, there will be a truncated 60-game season, together with some interesting new rules. Now, for traditionalists like me, the designated hitter rule coming to the National League is not necessarily something I'm jumping up and down over, but there are a lot of other rules that really are interesting. Some goofy things like men on base to start extra innings, players being in the dugout and up in the stands, and then they've got what I'm calling the Gaylord Perry rule. You remember him if you're old enough, where the pitchers are going to be able to take a wad of wet towels out to the mound with them. It just all is too much for me. I think they're going to be putting invisible men on the bases before long, but at least the national pastime is back, and we're going to see how fans react to all of this, because baseball is one of those sports where revenue is dependent upon fans in the stands. So seeing whether folks actually show up at the games is going to be very, very interesting. Let's hope they do. The sounds of play ball are going to be music to everybody's ears. And of course, politically this week, we saw the Trump rally in Tulsa and all the aftermath and fallout from that in the media, which criticized President Trump and his campaign roundly for a very disappointing crowd. Now, take whichever estimate of that crowd you want. The low estimate of, I think, 6,500 or 7,000, or the high estimate of 12 or 13,000. And imagine if Joe Biden had had an event with 10,000 people in attendance, all of them cheering lustily as he delivered a stem-winding oration without any notes, without any hesitation. Can you imagine that? The media would have been propping him up for the next 4 or 5 months leading up to Election Day, saying this was the greatest thing that ever happened. But President Trump's campaign has set the bar pretty high, both with previous events where venues were packed to the rafters and huge lines were outside, and in this case, by setting the expectation bar so high. We deal in that business here a little bit, and you never want to set the expectation bar higher than you can deliver. And when numbers alone become the defining moment of any event, I think you're in trouble, because you can never hit the right number. If President Trump had come out with 100,000 people, 20 inside the arena and 80 more outside, anxiously awaiting the opportunity to get inside themselves, the media would say, well, why didn't you have 200,000? You had 1 million applications for tickets. Now, it's turned out that a lot of those were fraudulent, brought about by folks on the other side meddling and playing games. We'll see how all that shakes out. But the campaign, nevertheless, put themselves in a tough position by setting an expectation bar so high for the re-emergence of the campaign of 2020. But who finally re-emerged? But out of his basement came Joe Biden. To great throngs? No. To quiet, by the wayside events. That's going to be a real problem for the Biden campaign before long, because there are questions about Joe Biden's capacity to run for office, not even as much as to run the country. And just watch. The debate over debates is coming up very soon, because the Biden campaign is going to do anything they possibly can to keep the number of debates between him and President Trump at an absolute minimum. The Commission on Debates is going to suggest the typical formats and number. The Biden campaign is going to negotiate like crazy to knock down both the time and the number. Watch and see, because a debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden would be a really fun thing to watch. And of course, the ongoing debate over monuments continues, and it's moved already away from Southern Confederate generals to much more curious things. You know, the left is really hung up on symbology and symbols, and you've got to wonder at this point what they really want. And the corollary to that, where does this all end? A lot of it is the old adage about giving the mouse a cookie and watching him expect a glass of milk, because the Confederate monuments were one thing. They'd been a historic discussion, etc. But now, look where they are. Tearing down monuments to Ulysses S. Grant, one of the heroes of the African Americans in the middle of the 19th century, a man whose compassion and humanity were chronicled by so many, and of whom Frederick Douglass spoke in glowing terms about what he had done for the African American community, and they're trashing his statue and his likenesses. Christopher Columbus, who died 500 years ago, long before there were slaves here. And, you just wonder where all this goes, because now they're saying Jesus Christ is the next target of removal and, God forbid, vandalizing of those images. It's got to end. The president's doing the right thing. And I believe this ultimately will be an issue in the 2020 campaign, because most Americans don't want to see violence. They don't want to see lawlessness. They don't want to see things desecrated and vandalized. It's as simple as that. And they're going to make a statement, and I believe it will be made loud and clear come November. They may not be saying much right now. The sound and fury is all on the other side, but they've drifted way too far to the left, and it's a challenge for Joe Biden and his campaign that I think is going to be very difficult to overcome. But as we move into July and towards Independence Day, hope you're having a great summer, because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.